All right. Now we've got sound. Uh Welcome to the stream, everybody. I was hoping to get this all done before we started, but that's okay. Um it gives us a chance to talk about just why NX Migrate is such a good tool. Um and really it's because of these, like, for whatever reason sometimes there will be migrations that fail. Um and we've seen it twice now. We've had two migrations that just sit there and do nothing. Um, if you're using ng upgrade, those migrations can sometimes cause problems, and you can wind up with like a stuck migration. Luckily, because we're using NX and we're using NX migrate, they build that migrations.json. We're able to go in and modify that file to suit our needs. Sometimes like a migration might need to run after another migration or things like that. I'm not using testbed.get anywhere because we haven't written any tests yet. So there's no reason for us to run that one. So we can just pull it out, right? Yeah. Welcome to the stream. And it's starting to get beautiful here in Utah. June is a really beautiful month in Utah. Once we hit July and August, it starts to get really hot. But June is beautiful. What are you, a bird? I wish. I wish I was a bird. And I could fly, man. Um, so there's some very interesting stuff that's going on here during these migrations. Oh wow, they're completely removing the use of common module. That's fascinating. Um, but the biggest one, and I called this out in the chat, um, is this one right here that converts the entire application to block control flow syntax. There have been a couple of applications that I've worked on where running that could run for hours. And so that migration piece can be targeted at specific folders. And so we would break that work up into chunks and target specific folders. I think if you have a significant size application and you're using ngIf, ng-switch, ng-for, you may want to do that work before upgrading to Angular 20, just because it's going to do it for you anyway. Or use NX migrate and take this out, and then prioritize that work later. But that is a big one to run. Like importing of documents, that one makes sense. Crazy. Upgrade Angular 4 to release. And I think the last piece we've got is next migrate at schematics. And we don't want to go to next, just Angular. Hey, Michael Dev, welcome to the stream. Been having issues in vanilla workspaces where the CLI migrations don't scope and try to apply it all repos and run out of memory. Dude. Wow. That one's interesting. The CLI migrations are trying to run on all. I'm curious about your folder structure there. Because that one. So with the schematics, we don't have any migrations. That's good. That one seems crazy, Michael. Um, I wonder what would cause it to like recurse all of your. It's crazy. Like my engineering brain's trying to solve it, and I'm like, stay focused, man, stay focused. But that is crazy. I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. um, so I'm going to upgrade. I'm gonna stay away from this Express upgrade. Like Express, I'm trying to even think where we're using Express, but I'm gonna stay away from these upgrades, and I'm just going to do these top upgrades. I don't see anything here that I'm worried about. Um, whoa, no, 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 no. So we'll grab those, and NCU should grab them for us, so we can see that it's already grabbed them. So we're just gonna hit enter and allow it to do its thing. Once that's done, we'll jump into stuff. The folder structure is the out of the box ng new application one. It just scans all the TS configs for each project. Oh, oh, that explains it. And um, man, that is crazy. And that explains the issue too. That you've got so much for it to look at. And then it would run it on every application. Wow. That's the I've used NX for so long that I think NX would probably do the same thing. But I'm curious how it would handle it differently. Um, because I've migrated very large NX mono repos with no problem. That's crazy. Um, my recommendation, Michael, is yesterday I um, I splurged a bit and rewarded myself. Um, so I grew up for those of you guys who don't know, I grew up on a potato farm in southeast Idaho. Um, and that's kind of the cliche in the U.S. is that everybody from Idaho is potato farmers. So yeah, I was an Idaho potato farmer cliche. Um, but I have a soft spot in my heart for like huge machinery. I hate farming because it's a lot of early mornings. A lot of cold days and windy days and hot days, and right. It's not that I hate it; it's just that there's parts of it that are really not fun. Um, there are parts of it that I really enjoyed, but the parts that I really enjoyed had to do with the big machinery. So I finally broke down and got Farming Simulator 25. Um, so take some time away from work and just go be a farmer virtually. um, anyway, it looks like we're in a good place. If we look, um, the only stuff left are majors, and I don't want to touch the majors. So let's see if we can pnpm exec nx serve tour of heroes. If our tour of heroes works, if it does, we're in a good space. Um, while we're doing that, so we just migrated a whole bunch of dependencies too. And push that stuff. So there we go. So that did serve, which is good. And Where is it? I think it's here. There we go. So our tour of heroes is working. Perfect. There are a couple of things that I was reminded that we wanted to do before we jump into Tour of Heroes. And this is just mainly some housekeeping stuff that we wanted to do. So let's pull up our code here. And one of the first things we want to do is go zoneless, right? And one of the easiest ways to determine if you're zoneless or not is just to pop open a console. And in your console, just look for zone, right? So if you have zone, then we're running zone.js, right? So we do have zone. We can see right here, we've got all the zone.js stuff in here. Let's get rid of that. We don't need it. So how do we get rid of zone? Well, the first thing we need to do is we go into our so it'll be different depending on if you're coming from like an old Angular project or like a more modern Angular project. An NX breaks things out, right? Like you've got a server config and you've got an app config. And this app config, like the way you can find your app config is if you go into your main.ts, you'll see that we're bootstrapping the application with app config, right? So that's where you'll find the config. It's always going to be in your main TS, and your server TS will be doing the same thing. So you'll see inside of here should be a server config. Oh, this is where we're using Express for our SSR stuff. But yeah, you'll typically have an app config server and an app config. And the app config server is what's running the SSR SSG stuff. Yeah, FarmSim 25 is like I've been a FarmSim fan since FS17, so that puts me on 8 years now. But Ole, welcome to the stream, man. Anyway, in our app config, we've got this provide zone change detection, right? This is providing zone for us. So we are instead going to provide, and I think it's called experimental. Oh no, they changed it over to zoneless, right? And we don't need event coalescing anymore. So that switches Angular to using zoneless change detection. Why don't you? Prettier set up to run on TS files. Set to run on save. In our prettier, or we've got our organized imports. It should be pulling that one out. If I do that, strange. Well, I don't want to make this into a tooling screen. I'll figure it out later. So we've got um, we've got our zoneless change detection in place. One thing to be aware of is that this often isn't enough. Yeah, so we can see that we've still got a zone available, even though we're not using it. So we're still bundling with zone. Yes, you're absolutely correct there. Hey, Margaret, welcome to the stream. Wiseman, you are 100% correct. And that's what I wanted to call out. Is just making that change. It changes so that you use the zoneless change detection, but it doesn't actually remove zone.js. And so the easiest way to get rid of it um, is we just start looking for places where we're using zone.js. So the pnpm lock, whatever. So here we're still in pnpm lock. There's a lot of references to it in pnpm lock. So in our project JSON, we've got it in the polyfills, which is exactly what Wiseman called out, right? And we can turn off the preview here. This is something that's provided by the NX plugin. So if you've got an NX enabled workspace and you've got the NX plugin, it's going to see all the different things you can run when you look at your project JSON. We can just close that for now. So we're going to remove zone.js from here. Save that. Our prettier isn't working. Show details. Oh, well, that explains why it's not running it. Prettier plugin organize imports. Oh. Take a look at our package JSON. Search for prettier plugin. Organize imports. Prettier plugin organize imports. So it is there. Oh. Missing quotes. Missing quotes. Is there a plugin for Prettier that removes unused imports automatically? I tried a third-party one with flat configs and ESLint plus Prettier, and it wouldn't work. Yeah, this Prettier plugin, Organize Imports, is supposed to be... That's why I was confused before. So now if I reformat with Prettier, there we go. There we go. So we can close that. And now it should be removing the imports. So if you use this Prettier plugin, Organize Imports, I can put these two. I can put this in the chat for you, so you can copy it. But this one's pretty good. It will sort the imports for you when you save, but it will also remove unused imports. Yeah, ESLint has a much better. The problem is that the Prettier RC, right? Prettier doesn't have that same thing that ESLint moved to. Hey, Abradores, welcome to the stream, man. Good to see you. This one I like a lot because it keeps the order of stuff that I do on my attributes in my HTML templates in the same order. So classes always come, and then attributes, and then things like that, right? So this is another one that I really like. Hey, TBD Gamer, welcome to the stream, man. So those are two prettier plugins that I almost always run. Anyway, back to what we were doing, right? We need to get rid of all of our Zone.js references that are outside of the PNP lock. And then we can probably remove Zone.js. So this is our zoneless change detection. Set up a zone test environment. Oh, we can't get rid of zone because we still have to use Zone.js in our unit tests, and that's one of the things that really can't change for a while. And I always forget that, but you have to keep zone around for your unit testing. But other than that, you can get rid of zone. And really, I think it's only if you're using Jest. If we'd done Vite, I think we might have been able to get rid of it. Some headhunter wrote to me for a Golang and React position, so now I lied on my CV, sent her my CV, and now hopefully I get that Golang interview, and I'm grinding Golang like I'm home. Don't blame you, man. Like, here's the thing. I don't blame you at all, because it's to the point anymore where you're competing against AI, and AI lies all the time, right? It hallucinates and does stuff like that. So land your position, and regardless, you're going to be grinding your first few weeks or months. Like at my current job, because of the way the organizational structure is, they're saying it could be like 3 to 4 months before I'm truly effective, and it could be 6 months before they expect anything significant out of me. And it's different based on position and things like that, right? Like I want to be clear about that. That it's definitely going to be much different for like a junior position versus a mid versus a senior position versus like architecture director positions. Like the expectations can change wildly. But regardless, any place that you go, regardless of how standard they are, you're going to be grinding the way they do things where they are, right? And until you're comfortable with that, it'll be a while for you to reach that comfort level. One thing to be like, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, absolutely. I think there's a setup in Jest preset Angular for zoneless. You're absolutely right, wise man. There is that setup in Jest preset Angular. I'm a consultant. I was always expected to be operative in 1 to 2 weeks maximum, and now I'm doing the job of several people. Yeah, well, and so I saw like a post on a tweet, a post on X. I don't know what you want to call it anymore. Where somebody says, why is the payout for hard work always more hard work, right? And that's the thing, right? Is that you identified yourself as somebody who can get things done, and so now you're the person that they look to get things done, right? DVD gamer, I keep asking AI to build me a distributed system that will slowly replace a dying PHP system. Keeps giving me poor advice. Did you guys see the story? And I saw it on X yesterday. But one of the big AI tooling is going bankrupt, and they'd received billions in funding. But it turns out that what they were doing is it wasn't actually their AI writing the code. They had contracted with a team in India. So it was Indian programmers that were writing the code, and then that team was billing the Indian contractors, and then the Indian contractors were turning around and billing the AI company the same amount, right? So there's like this circular billing thing. It appeared that the AI company had a ton of incoming revenue. Um, and then it also made that Indian company look really, really good, right? Like very, very positive because they were getting a whole bunch of money from an AI company. So there's like this circular mess going on. But it turns out that the code, this tool was really amazing, but the code wasn't actually being written by AI, it was being written by humans. Um, AI stands for actually Indian. Um, Builder.ai, yes, it was something like that. You Americans have it so easy. um, but yeah, we Americans have it easy in a lot of ways. I will admit that. Um, but yeah, it was hilarious that this big AI, and I think it was Builder or something like that, Builder.ai or something like that. They're going bankrupt after receiving billions in venture capital because their AI wasn't actually AI; it was actual humans. So AI stands for financial fraud. Go figure. Isn't that how Amazon store AI that charged when you left the store actually worked? I don't know. I don't know if that's how AI worked or the Amazon AI worked. But I thought the story was hilarious. Let me see if I can find it. And then we'll get into writing some code. Um, yeah, here we go. Like here's one from X, right? So then Natasha neural network turned out to be 700 Indian programmers. Startup Builder AI offered to write any application. In reality, customer requests are sent to the Indian office where 700 Indians wrote code instead of AI. um, so this is crazy, right? At the same time, the application written by AI constantly glitched. The code was unreadable. The functions did not work. In general, everything was like real artificial intelligence. Like I mean, they're throwing some shade here. Um, um, but they attracted. Oh, I guess I'm off on the money. 445 million. Somebody else was saying billions that I saw yesterday. But yeah, if you search for builder.ai today on X, like it's trending, it's all over the place. Um, you guys want to see this one? Um, there you go. There's like one link to it. It was just crazy. This blew up yesterday on X. Um, it's crazy how I went from I'm never saying X to now, we say it more often than not. But it just I don't know where AI will be in 5 years because AI is pretty good when it's actually doing like AI stuff, right? And I don't think they necessarily needed to throw shade at the company. The company already messed up enough. Um, but I found it incredibly hilarious that like one of the better tools out there was actual humans pretending to be AI. Um, so all right. So I think at this point we may have officially removed zone. So let's run that test, right? And I can't take credit for this. I actually stole this idea from Deborah Carrata in one of her videos that I watched when she was talking about zoneless. She was the one who said to look for zone. And now we don't have zone, right? So now that we've removed all references to zone, um, then we're no longer running in a we're in a zoneless context now. Um, so if you guys go and you try to move to zoneless, you may still be bundling zone. If you're still bundling zone, it's really easy to check. Just check for zone in the console with a capital Z. Um, if if that symbol is found in the console, you're still bundling zone, because when zone is loaded, it defines that object, right? Um, if you're still bundling it, just go search for instances of zone.js, right, and start removing those, and eventually you'll get rid of it. But now we're zoneless. I wonder if they hit the S&P, in which case I got scammed too. I don't know if they hit the S&P. I haven't done a lot, right? Like, this is me just sharing something that I found hilarious yesterday. I really haven't dug into it. But yeah, if they did hit the S&P, you probably got scammed. That company deserves shade. What they did is financial fraud, probably illegal, cost investors money. I hope someone goes to jail. The company deserves shade. I think they should throw shade on the company. But I think it was unnecessarily harsh to throw shade on the code written by, those poor Indian developers who probably were scammed themselves and didn't realize what they were doing, right? They probably didn't realize that that they were part of a scam too, right? So throwing shade on them, saying that the code sucked and whatever, that's the shade that I don't think necessarily needed to be thrown. Builder AI deserves everything it gets, right? They're scamming everybody. They were probably scamming the Indians. They were probably scamming, right? They're scamming all their customers. They were scamming their investors, right? They deserve the shade that they got. But I don't think that a group of people writing code necessarily deserves to have shade thrown their way, right? What is zone/zoneless? So early on in Angular, when we moved from, if you remember Angular JS, right? You had $watch, you had $scope, you had $apply, right? Like all of these methods that you interacted with to do change detection, right? And there were like whole talks on, like, you're messing up your application by using $watch too much, or you're right, you could do something better with $scope, or right, there was all this weirdness around all of the change detection management in Angular JS. So when they moved to Angular, they're like, well, let's make it easier, right? Well, how do we do that? And I forget who wrote it, but Mishko called it open heart surgery on the browser at runtime, right? At one of the NG confs. Angular to sell zone-proof domes and blog posts. But basically what Zone.js does is Zone.js patches the microtask and macrotask queues of the browser, right? And microtasks and macrotasks are because your browser really only has one thread, right? And so when you schedule something to be asynchronous, right, like an HTTP call, or something that you add the async await to, or something that you create a promise for, or things like that, they either get put in the microtask or macrotask task queue. So Zone.js would patch that, and when microtasks were run or macrotasks were run, it would run change detection in Angular. It also patched things like button clicks and key up events, and there were a whole bunch of things, right? Like set timeout is going to interact with those queues and things like that. But there were a whole bunch of things that Zone.js patched in your browser that would allow Angular to run change detection. It's part of the reason why Angular feels so magical when you're doing two-way binding, right? but it's very, very aggressive. Um, and we're often running change detection cycles way more than we need to be running them, right? Um, and so way back, I don't know, this has been a while. If you ever get a chance to talk to Michael Hladky or watch any of his, well, I'm saying Michael, it's Michal Hladky. Um, if you ever get a chance to read any of his stuff, watch any of his talks, or talk with him, um, I highly recommend it. Very, very performance focused, very, very, very smart person. And um, he and a group of other very intelligent people came up with RX thing. Um, and they were able to prove that you could write an application that was very performant, and once you remove zoneless and take control over your change detection, you get a whole bunch of benefits. um, but yeah, I spent all day trying to clean up my app yesterday and realized just how much I have no clue about signals and signal store. Signals and signal store, like Michael Small is probably um he's probably your best guy to talk to, I'll be honest. With Signal Store, he's been working with Rayner and a bunch of other smart people. He just got his first PR approved in the NGRX Signals repo on GitHub. um, yeah. Oh, did I go down for a bit? I didn't even realize. Okay. You guys probably missed some of that, but zone removing zone changes the way you do change detection. I don't know how much of that you guys caught, but removing zone JS changes the way you do change detection. You get better control over the change detection, but you lose a lot of the magic, right? And so stuff that would work before won't work anymore. Um, I think um, Johanderson, I think it's less about change detection cycles being less of a thing, and cycles being cheaper. I think it was more about making it easy for devs to pick up Angular, um, because we've been talking about keeping functions out of templates, right? And if you put functions in templates, make sure they're fast, right? That goes into change detection cycles. So I paused for a few seconds. That sucks. It got laggy for a few seconds. Still got to make the change for the docs and the NGRX repo. You were thinking of the forms experiment. Oh yeah, yeah. PR was where I suggested the line change, which got accepted. That's true. But still, Michael is by far probably one of the best signals, like NGRX signals resources that's out there. He's been doing some amazing stuff. He's been presenting with Rayner. He understands forms, or he understands signal forms pretty well, better than I do. He understands signal store probably better than I do. So definitely a good resource. Follow his stuff, and if you get a chance to talk to him, highly recommend it. Very, 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 very intelligent coder. Um, Engineer. I need to stop calling people coders, because like one of my mantras right now is that if all we do is code, AI's beating us, right? If all we do is code, so we have to be engineers, and that's how we're going to survive this AI thing. Although if other AIs turn out to be 700 Indians, then we're probably in a good place. I don't know. Uh, yeah, Michael Fatke from RX Angular, amazing. Michal, I keep saying Michal, and like seriously, go back and watch anything you can find from him, from ngconf, from every time I'm somewhere where he's speaking, that's a talk I'm gonna be at. And he's so unassuming, and but he's thinking very deeply about the internals, and he thinks very, very deeply about performance. Um, I'm just peering at the surface. They show us, yeah, and that's the crazy thing, right? Is I think a lot of people are kind of peering at the surface, but we don't know how deep everything goes, right? And we don't know what everything is. Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. And to be honest, I don't want to dox you, but I also look for your content, and I look for your wife's content too. I know I'm going to be there. Yeah, Push Based is an amazing company. And in fact, when I was looking for a job, I reached out to Mikhail. One of the downsides to being an American is American salaries make it very, very difficult to work with European companies. They just don't have the budget for American salaries, um, which sounds like me complaining. It's not me complaining, but there was a missed opportunity there where I think would have been amazing. But hey, Marcus, he bought me a drink at NGConf because we both had Hawaiian shirts and mustaches. Exactly. Like he's an amazing guy. Just very amazing. Very, very friendly. And he's always just, I don't know. Go say hi. Like if you're at a conference where he is, go say hi. I love talking to Mikhail. Yeah. We've got this all working. We're zoneless now. It's time to actually start looking at what is in Tour of Heroes, right? And let's move this up so that we're by it. Actually, before we do that, let's make one more change. So let's go ahead and so we fixed prettier. We'll push that. And then here, so we are zoneless, which is going to be important. There's some other things we can do to get close to like signal-based components, and we'll talk about those when we get to that point. Because signal-based components are something I'm very excited about, but there is one last thing I want to take a look at, and it is this NX welcome component. We're just going to get rid of it. So goodbye. We're going to delete you anyway, but that's going to break our application because it's got an NX welcome component. So for right now, we're just going to add, go take a look at app component.ts. Actually, we're going to grab this too. We're going to get rid of the app component.html. And this is a personal preference of mine, right? So I don't think that you should do this. For me, for whatever reason, having the CSS inside of a component tends to break my brain. So I tend to leave the CSS on its own. But the component itself, we're going to move into the actual, we're going to move into the actual template, right? So here, instead of the template URL, we're going to create a template. And for right now, we're just going to have, yeah, we can do an H1. And we can do title here. Oh, man. It helps if you put it inside of the template itself. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're just going to add the router. We're going to add the router outlet here. So now we've added the router outlet and we've added our title. So our application got a lot less impressive. right? So now we're just a tour of heroes, but we'll be fixing that up here pretty quick. Doesn't like CSS in component, uses Tailwind. Exactly. I am like a contradiction, right? Like I'm a constant contradiction. Um, and that's just who I am. Um, let's clean this up just a little bit. So if we go take a look at Daisy, um, inside of here, they've got a container, right? So we've got these notions of dividers, which are cool, drawers, footers, indicators, mask a stack. So maybe it's in Tailwind. So layout, columns. Isn't there a notion of a container? That's not what we wanted. Padding and margin, width, min width, max width. So what we want is basically, we'll just add so we want an auto in the X direction. So let's go back here and let's just throw a div around everything. Divception, right? Actually, we don't need this. We don't need this at all. Instead, we can add a host binding. So on our host binding, we can add a class, right? And our class, we can say, hey, in the MX, we want the auto. And we can try this for now and just see what it gives us, right? So we've got a couple of different classes here. And now if we take a look, inspect this, our app root has rem. So max width is 3XL. This is probably where we want to take a look at our tailwind here. Take a look at our max width. So the max width fraction, let's go with like a max width of 80. Just because we want it to be a bit centered. So max width 80. And we're going to go with a padding of just 4. Let's see what that gives us. Oh, what we're missing, and this is why it's broken. This isn't a block level element, and so we've got a problem with it. That's the piece that we're missing, and I always forget this until I remember it. But we can just make this block level. Usually in your classes, you can make them display block. But by making this a block level element, now we're getting our stuff centered, right? Which is good. And let's put a min width of 80 on that also. For right now, let's not mess with it too much. But now we've kind of centered our stuff. It doesn't look centered because of varying things, right? Like Tour of Heroes isn't centered, but our stuff is centered. So I don't want to dive into that too much. But now we've got our container with our router outlet that is going to be inside of something that's centered, and we can worry about like visuals later, right? But we're in a good place. The other thing we could do is we could look at like some making the height take up the entire column with overflow. We can take a look at that later. But for right now, we're in a decent place. And this is like one of the things that I recommend is if you're using Tailwind, use these host bindings with classes on them. This is going to allow you to, like I was starting to do kind of divception, right? Or div overuse, where inside of my template, I was going to add a div and I was going to add Tailwind classes to that div and stuff like that, right? That's the tool that we tend to reach for as developers, but we do have a semantic, um, tag. It's a semantic element. And if we treat this like a block level element, and the easiest way to do that is just to add block, or if we want, we can make it block with a couple of things, right? The easiest ones to do are just to throw block on there if you're not going to do any sort of layout in it. If you're going to do layout, then once you add flex or you add grid to it, then it becomes a block level element. But this is a good way for you to minimize the number of divs, and you can do bindings on this too. So you can absolutely do bindings. Like if you want to bind to your class, right? This becomes the same. And now notice that it's telling us, hey, it doesn't understand what block, right? Because we don't have block in the class. If instead, right, we take out this title that we don't need, and instead we do protected, and we do host CSS. We can do host Tailwind classes, right? And then here we can come back and we can just say, hey, bind this to host Tailwind classes. Notice that now it works just fine. Our title doesn't work. That's fine. This is our Angular Tour of Heroes, right? And we no longer need the interpolation. So there we go. So now when we go take a look at our stuff, we've got our Angular Tour of Heroes and stuff like this. There is something we're missing, right? Because our Tour of Heroes is pretty small. And if we go take a look at Daisy, base style, layout and typography. So here the layout it's going to use Tailwind as this, but the CSS, the Tailwind typography plugin, this is what we want to use. So let's go add that to our stuff. Absolutely. The app needs to have good UI. You're absolutely right. Oh, I may have confused you with somebody else. I may have. Probably. I've been thinking you were somebody else. Random question. Any recommendation on a good toaster library for Angular? Um, Toast libraries for Angular. There's like NGX Toast, um, React Hot Toast. um, Spartan has some good ones. Um, yeah, Tailwind. So Tailwind with Daisy has some amazing toasts in it, Marcus. If you Daisy UI is really really good for if you're using Tailwind. And inside of here, there is a toast, right? So you can see the different toasts that it puts together, and you can style them using um, just typical Tailwind stuff. Um, the downside to this is that you have to maintain a lot of stuff yourself. Um, so you might have to do a bit more than this. I've used NGX Toast. I'll have to take a look at some of the other ones. The app used to have a good, yeah. Are you doing some side project? Well, I still don't want to bump up the bundle size too much. You'll still be compatible with Safari 14. Ah, whoever thought to make component element inline by default was crazy. Even the block class is possible to auto-generate from the schematics of component to be automatically with display block. Absolutely, and you could do that in the CSS. The reason I don't do that is I tend to not have as much CSS when I'm using Tailwind. And the way I tend to write CSS now is I put more CSS at the global level and then add those in the host bindings just because I'm using Tailwind. But that is 100% true, Wiseman. And that used to be my advice when you were generating components. And if you're not using Tailwind and if you're not using like the style of CSS that I typically do, then what you're recommending is still 100% my recommendation. So let's go take a look at this. We need to install the Tailwind stuff. Let's go ahead and install the Tailwind. And we need to make sure that we use pnpm. And then we need to add just the plugin here. So that was added. So the next thing we need to do is go into our code. And in our styles of CSS, we just need to add the Tailwind. And you know what? I'm going to move that up above Daisy because Daisy interacts with it. And the last thing we need to do, so like if we go take a look at this right now, it's still not doing anything for us. But what we can do is the same thing from here, where, right, we just add pros to our stuff. So there are a couple ways you can do this. You can go find the body tag from the index.html. And in the body tag, you can add class equals pros, right? And once we do that, we're going to see that now things start to get larger and look the way we want them to. The other place where we can do this is, and this is where I've taken to do it more often because I may want different things in the body. But the app component.ts, we can just add here our pros. right? And that's going to do the same as what we just did. Um, the last thing that it talks about is like large pros Excel. And we could probably do that too, right? And we can make stuff even bigger if they've got the real estate for us to do it. Um, so we can go here and do that. And that is, you know what, the other thing we could do, and this is just to show like signals and stuff, right? Is we could take this and just make it a signal. Oops. Um, just to show, especially with what we've done now, um, we may want this to be a signal because if we ever want to change the class for whatever reason, um, we want this to be a signal because we're in a zoneless environment. So if we make it a signal when we change it, then that host tailwind class um, will update, right? It'll raise that flag saying, "Hey, on the next change detection cycle, you need to change," right? Without that, we're zoneless, so we won't get that. We won't get that change. And so now, right, we're back to where we were. However, if we go and um, where is here it is. So right, we can see it on a smaller screen versus a larger. Um, and then here on the responsive, right, we could try out a bunch of different things like that, right? I always recommend that you take a look at your responsive stuff. Um, but yeah, we're in a good space right now. Um, do you guys know if we are getting concat like support for resources? Can you explain a little bit more about that, Johanderson? Because with resources, it's still possible to use RxJS. I do hope we can get some RxJS type control on non-Rx resource stuff if possible. Otherwise, I may end up rolling with Rx resources. Yeah, but right now, even with Rx resource, if the dependencies change, we just unsubscribe from the previous observable instead of waiting for it to complete. Oh, I didn't know that. Which would be really nice. Don't tell when classes get added to the bundle at compile time. They do. Johanderson, Tailwind classes get added at compile time, which is why you need a bunch of the extra libraries because Tailwind only adds the classes that you need at compile time and makes things a lot nicer, right? There is like one thing we can do here um, is we can say, we want a min width full, right? So it's going to try and use up as much space as it gets. That messed me up. Because now we've got a max width of 80. Right. If we do a min width of 80. Really? I must be doing this wrong because I want 80%. Okay. Let's just do max width 9/10. And min width full min width. We'll do a min width of like 3/4 and a max width of 9/10. And no, let's just go with a width, right? So a max width of 9 out of 10, right? 90%, and then a width of 90%, right? And that should give us some better. So now if we look at this, right, we're taking up 90%, and that's fine, right? Um, so we aren't going to be right up against the edges. 85% is 80% is 4 out of 5. Yeah, you could also do max with 80%. Thank you for the help. And that's one of the things. Like I don't do Tailwind a lot in my job. And so a lot of times when I'm doing Tailwind, it's me having to go back and remember stuff. So thank you for that, Johanderson. All right, so here we go. Now we can finally get into talking about like Tour of Heroes, right? And like what is in Tour of Heroes. So they go through a whole bunch of stuff, but they use directives, they use components, they use data binding, editable fields, user events, and keystrokes and clicks, selecting a hero from a list with detail views, formatting data with pipes, shared services. We're gonna make huge usages of shared services through our signal store, and then routing to do a whole bunch of that, right? So, like the live example here. May not run. It looks like there's a whole bunch of stuff that, well, it might be doing all the npm setup stuff on Stack Blitz. We've got our hero service. There's just a whole bunch of stuff here, right? I don't want to wait for this. We know what Tour of Heroes looks like, right? This is kind of what we're going to be designing. Ours will look slightly different because we're going to be using Daisy and Tailwind to get stuff, but we can see the different components and things like that. We can see, there's editing and things. So we created the new project. We spent quite a bit of time doing that. There's a whole bunch of CSS in here. Like they're styling their H1s and H2s and bodies and stuff like that. We'll take a look at that later. So the hero editor. So we want a heroes component. So heroes, and generates 3 files in heroes. So we're going to generate our heroes component also, but we're going to do it using NX, right? So we're going to come over here to our NX generator. And actually, that's not where we want to do it. So this is the first piece where we need to make a decision about, do we want a library or not? I don't think I want to go, well, maybe we should, right? We're going crazy on this, right? So let's put our stuff in a library just to talk about, the benefits of a library and things like that, right? So we're going to go here and we're going to go find our NX generate, and we're going to generate a library. So let's create an Angular library. The directory where the library is placed, we're going to call this library our UI library, right? And so we can see down here, it's going to put it in UI. I want it in a libs UI, right? So now we've got our libs UI, and it's going to create a UI component. We'll get rid of that eventually. It doesn't need to be buildable. Lazy, we'll worry about that later. We're going to use defer, probably do a lot of our lazy stuff. The name of the library should be our UI library. And what happens if we take out the directory? So what if we put it in libs? Yeah, we don't want that. So we're going to put this back in libs UI. We're going to take out the name. Right? And that's why I like this stuff at the bottom. So we don't have any parents. We're not going to make it publishable. We don't need to worry about routing yet. Module spec. We don't need to add Tailwind to it because it will be imported into something that's using Tailwind. By default, we're going to switch to on push. Hello? And this is going to put us closer to being signal component-esque, right? So we want our stuff to be on push. We're not going to mess with that. This is the Wiseman Z is saying, you know, you can make things display block by default. So there we go. We'll set that by default, but we're probably going to remove that a lot. And this host pseudo selector in Angular allows you to apply classes to the host object that CSS is a part of. And we don't care about flats. Here, we're going to go at TOH/UI. And this is going to allow us to import from at TOH/UI, right? So our tour of heroes will be imported from there. Inline styles, I don't do, but should we do it? We'll do it. We'll do it. ESLint. And then the prefix, we're going to go TOH on all of our selectors. So TOH is just tour of heroes, right? We'll let it generate its own selector. So the parser options, you need to turn this on if you're using some of the crazier ESLint rules. But we'll worry about that if we ever get an error that says, hey, you need the parser options. Whether to skip the creation of a default module. Well, we should skip that creation anyway because it should just be standalone. Skip test, skip tsconfig, standalone library. We're going to use strict type checking, CSS styling, tags. We can talk about that later if we get deeper into NX stuff. Unit test runner, we're going to leave it as jest, and view encapsulation, we're going to leave that all alone. We're going to generate our library. This is where our tour of heroes stuff is going to come from. And I think this is, this is where we want to start. Very interesting that we're doing a pnpm install. Very interesting. So now we've got our UI stuff here. So we can take a look at that. So if we take a look, tour of heroes, but under our libs, right? So now we've got our apps. Now we've got a libs directory. Under libs, we've got our UI stuff. One thing that was changed, and maybe the better way to look at this is in here, right? So here, like the app component, we changed this. We'll go ahead and stage that. The index.html. Interesting that the doc type got changed. I think that was probably a prettier thing. And so this is us adding the UI lib. README for the UI lib. Here, this is where we're exporting stuff. So this is our barrel file. Barrel files are very, very powerful, but there's something we need to be careful of in Angular. NX is working on some stuff that would make barrel files not as necessary. But until we can do that in Angular, Angular doesn't support the TypeScript. What are they called? But there's a way to do names in TypeScript, so we don't need to do barrel files. Until that happens, like be very, very careful of your barrel stuff. You can wind up creating bigger bundles by not being careful about what you put in your index.ts files. And maybe we'll come across that here in a bit. I don't know why I'm checking this stuff in. I'm going to delete it anyway, but whatever. Test setup, right? We're using zones in our tests. Our TS config. I'm looking specifically. There should be a TS config base that we're going to take a look at. For NX.json added the Angular library and some defaults for that for Project Crystal. Yeah, so this is the file we're looking at. Notice here it added @toh/ui, and that points to libs UI source index.ts, right? So that's how we're going to get our imports. And that, that's the important thing when we're adding a library. And that's, make sure you're keeping those all properly tracked and things like that. It allows you to avoid weird imports like ... right? Like direct imports. Come on, stage all changes. And I'm just going to say that we added, we removed NX generated stuff and added library, UI library. Right. I should probably get used to using like conventional commits. It's a pretty powerful tool, but for this library, I don't know that it matters that much. So we've got our library in place, right? Following the tour of heroes, we need to create a heroes component in that library. So let's go clean up our library. Let's close all of this. Let's go into our library, and inside of our source, in our index.ts. So inside of here, we want to remove this UI component. We're going to delete that, right? And then in our index, we need to remove this also. We're not going to use it. And that's going to clean that up. However, inside of our UI library, we're going to generate a component, right? And maybe we want to put it here. NX generate a component. So we're going to generate an Angular component. The path to the component should be relative to the current working directory. we can see that we're in the workspace root libs UI source lib. So we can just create our component here as our hero. I think it's heroes component that they want us to create. Yeah. So here's our heroes component. We don't need to export it. We're going to leave it standalone because that's the default, right? Change detection on push for sure. Display block. Like you could check that. That's fine. Export default. We could use a default export. But I don't want to do that. You can use that for lazy loading. We'll inline the style and we'll inline the template. We don't need a module. And the prefix is just going to be TOH. The selector will be the TOH heroes. Style CSS component. This type right here, like I can change this and you'll see that what this affects is the piece here, right? And so one thing you could do is to follow like the newer strategy is you could make this NG, right? The new style guide says a lot of stuff like that. If we have hundreds of libs, it will be so many imports. I mean, in tsconfig base. So the tsconfig base, making that readable really comes down to alphabetizing it and things like that. My suggestion to help, like, once you get into the enterprise level of code, right, where you've got thousands of devs writing stuff, libraries are a good way to focus the devs, right? So like this team is working on, you know, the user-based features. This team is working on auth. This team is working on, right? And those libraries that they work on are the way to control that. I'm going to go back to component here, just because it helps me understand what heroes.ng.ts is, right? Well, actually, let's go to ng here. Anyway, let me finish my first thought and then get back to what I'm thinking about here, right? As my brain is trying to process a million things. My suggestion to keep the number of libraries under control is to use a DDD style approach, right? Figure out your bounding contexts and then try to make sure that your libraries fall within those bounded contexts, right? And then you don't overlap boundaries. And then try not to get too granular within that bounded context, right? It's a balancing act, Ole, to be honest, and it's difficult because everybody has their own opinions about what too granular means. Everybody might have their own opinions about bounded contexts. Everybody might have their own opinions about all these other things, right? And for anybody who's like here and doesn't know what a bounded context is, right? A bounded context is it's an agreed upon boundary within your application where things should live. So for it to be like a true bounded context, you need to have it spelled out, and there should probably be a diagram showing, you know, how it works. And that way, when you want to add something, you can determine, oh, like, right, like if you have users in your application, that might be a bounded context, right? So anything that has to do with user updates, you know, user permissions, things like that might exist within the bounded context of the user. The other place that you might have like an auth bounded context. You might have like a shopping cart bounded context, right? You might have a store page bounded context, things like that, right? That makes sense to be together, but it's something that you work out with your team and then you document. And that's probably the best way to keep tsconfig base under control, because as we know, as engineers and devs, we're really, really good at just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? And if we don't think about it beforehand, you'll wind up with a TS config base that has like 1,000 libraries in it. It's difficult to maintain, right? Like the granularity is important too, because if you're not granular enough, then a change could trigger like a massive recompile, right? If you're too granular, then you're importing 1,000 things and it just gets ugly, right? So there's always a there's always this balancing act and this trade-off act, right? So we're gonna follow the NG standard that has been suggested by the new style guide, right? So it should be .ng.ts now. And then the way we're going to tell if something's a component or not is we're going to put it in the components directory, right? So I tend to go more flat on this. And the reason for that is that I don't have a ton of files. There's only going to be 2 files for my heroes component because we put the styles and we've put the template inside of the component, right? So we'll go ahead and generate this. Yeah, anytime. And, you know, feel free to ask. And even then, feel free to push back and like, you know, be like, yeah, I get that. But because sometimes it's easy for me to say, yeah, do this, right? But what I'm telling you to do doesn't necessarily help, right? So we're going to okay. First of all, /lib components heroes. So there we go. So now we've exported the component. So at this point, we can go back to our app. And for right now, just to test it, right, we can go to our app component.tss. And inside of here, we can just say, hey, we want a TOS dash heroes. And we're going to use self-closing tags here. But to do that, we need to import the heroes component. I actually really hate that. We're gonna fix this. This is one of the downsides to using the heroes ng stuff, right? Because the component got named heroes ng. We really want it to be called heroes component, so we know what it is. So we have to do a bit more work if we use the ng suggested spec. And I don't know that it's been accepted, and so the tooling isn't going to. You need IDA Vim integration in your web store. Man, I know some Vim ports. I'm not like one of the Vim savants that's out there. And I don't want to turn this into another tooling stream, right? Like at some point I should probably start using Vim stuff. I agree with that. But I'm not to that point yet. Heroes components. Let's go ahead and import that. So there we go. So now we've got our heroes component. Our TOS heroes is here. And now if we go to our browser page, Is it not compiling? What have I done? Heroes NG, TOH dash heroes. I did TOS. Somebody probably caught that. Every stream is a tool stream. We could do a stream where I can teach you my IDVM tooling. That actually might be cool. That might be really cool. There we go. So now our heroes component works, right? It doesn't do anything, but here it is. And we were able to get it into a library, right? We imported our library. And if we use the right selector, then everything works. It's a block level component because we, in the component itself, right, it's got display block. The other way we could do this, and because I'm using Tailwind, this is the way I typically do it. But I typically just do class, and here I just do block, right? And that's going to do the same thing. And that way I'm not adding extra CSS. Like with display block, every component is getting CSS that has display block on it, right? If I do class block, then I can add this block here, and it's less code that goes to the browser, right? Because Tailwind's already got the display block piece for me. The other thing is when you're adding CSS to the browser, anywhere there's CSS, the browser has to stop, parse that CSS, and then do a repaint, right? If, on the other hand, I'm using like a global styles approach, then when the application first loads, it gets all the classes that I need. And then when we go and we add this class block, the browser already knows what the block class means. So it doesn't have to stop, parse some CSS, and then cause a repaint, right? There might be some repaints that happen because of block, because I could be causing reflows and things like that. But we aren't having to stop and parse, some more code. It's able to move on and work faster, and that's why I tend to like the Tailwind approach over inline CSS. That there is a bit of method to my madness, and I know a lot of people. Man, there's something in the air today. I do know a lot of people really like using styles like this, right? And it's fine, right? There's nothing wrong with using styles like this, and I've probably done it wrong, but yeah, I have, right? Like styles here, right? So this host binding here is perfectly fine, right? And we could even use @apply, which is another reason that you might want to do host stuff, right? But this adds CSS the browser has to stop and parse. So it's always worth it to ask, is this a style that could be reused? And especially if you're copying and pasting styles between components, that's a good opportunity for you to potentially create like a global style sheet that can be imported somewhere, and then stop the stop the stop the browser from having to stop and reprocess everything based on new styles that you pushed. I saw a tweet from Maddie. Sorry, I missed the reply. Yes, I am. It looks like .ng is needed anyway. Oh, maybe I should take a look at this one. Maybe I'm giving old information. Old dude giving old information. Come on, streamer, update your stuff. Yeah, this. Oh, interesting. This is an interesting take. So it's not that he's arguing for the component; he's arguing for user breadcrumb. Um, I would still. So the way I tend to build applications might make this take different, right? Because I might have a user breadcrumb component, but I might also have a user breadcrumb model and a user breadcrumb service, right? Or a user breadcrumb store, right? So I'm not sure if I agree with this take. Um, I need to think about it more. But thank you for sharing. Um, User profile page or user settings view are better names. And maybe view is a good way to look at it. Right? Because that fits in with what I was talking about, and it tends to point towards almost an MVC type pattern, right? Where you've got the user view, the user model, the user store, the user service, but we're still suffixing those. Like the view is the suffix there, right? Or page is the suffix there. Um, I think I think you're onto a good um, I think you're onto a good idea. Let's see what this one is. Um, I guess that shows how much I trust you guys and I'm willing to just pull these up, right? Directives and services no longer use suffixes, so it's just user instead of user component. Right. And I think it's the NX tooling that's adding that, right? Um, so this is export class user. Like this is badly named. Yeah, it is badly named. Like this is the tough argument that we have, and so maybe instead of calling this a component, let's rename it. Um, right. So instead of heroes component, let's rename this to be heroes view. Right. And okay, so um, the Angular style guide is actually telling me to move it to a heroes view component.ts. Um, so let's try renaming this file. Let's take off the ng. Um, let's also that's going to be broken for a while, but my index.ts there. See, I'm not happy about this. We could call this heroes dash view, but it's going to complain here. The Angular style guide is what's catching us out here. So it's the Angular ES lint that's catching us here, right? So this is where it gets tough. It gets very tough, right? It is taking, so I'm using Angular ESLint. You can see right here that it's this rule, the Angular ESLint component class suffix, that it's calling into, and it's calling into account the style guide, right? So if we go take a look at the style guide, and this is like a lot of stuff is changing with Angular lately. So there is a bit of issue there, but let's go here. So in the style guide, it specifically calls out user profile component. Oh, look, the style guide has been updated. So it's not that the style guide, yeah, it is a very hot topic, but notice here that it is the linting, because here they aren't using component anymore. Are they saying? Yeah, when in doubt, prefer consistency. Let's just search for component in here, or let's search for dot component. Okay, so they aren't using dot component in here anywhere. So the style guide has been updated, and this is part of the problem. For now, we're just going to call this component, and our index.ts should be fine. Our app component, we're still grabbing. We need to grab heroes component here. Boom. And here we also need heroes component. So there we go. We're gonna follow the component for right now. Feature star, UI star prefix. Yeah, and I agree with that. The main reason we're gonna go with what we're doing right now is that the Angular ESLint rules haven't been updated, and because they're not updated, they're gonna cause errors, and I don't want the errors to be I don't want the errors to be in my code, right? We just don't want to confuse people with, right? So as people are watching along, we don't want to confuse them with why are we ignoring errors and stuff like that. So for right now, we'll settle on the we're just going to use component. We're not going to use the .ng. We're not going to use any of that. We're just going to settle on component for right now, and that way we can move forward with the stuff that we actually want to worry about. Right, so we've created our component. It's using app. We're using TOH. We also don't have 3 files. So it wants us to add a hero called Windstorm. We'll do that. Right, we're gonna follow this, but we're going to do ours slightly differently. This is where we're going to introduce a store, right? So within our lib, we're going to add a new directory. We're going to call this our stores directory. And we want to add a new file, and this will be our heroes.store.ts, right? And the other thing we want to do is we want to add a new directory, and this will be our models directory, right? And typically, like this is more heroes.model.ts. This is typically more, this is going to be more enterprise focused, right? Because for something even like the Tour of Heroes, this might be overkill. But what we want to do is we want to export an interface here. And this is our heroes interface, right? Well, we're going to call heroes, yeah. This will be our heroes view interface, right? And inside of this interface, it wants us to export something that's called hero, right? So we're going to add hero, and it's going to be a string, right? So now we've got our interface. There's one other thing that I want to do, and it is export const. Well, we can export a function, and we could say create hero. This works, right? And it's going to return our heroes view. And here, instead of this, we're going to go with this will be our view. Well, this will be our options, and our options will be a partial of type heroes view, right? So people can pass in partials here. Let's make this smaller so people can see it, right? But for right now, this is our default hero. And this is going to be important in the future for things like testing and things like that. We want a way to be able to create this view, right? So there we go. We've got our heroes view. We've got our heroes model. Now our heroes store. I just realized we haven't added signal store. So let's go ahead and install our signals. So we'll go to index. That shouldn't be an issue anymore. Let's just go take a look at our index.ts and just make sure. Yeah, that's all fine. WUI source index. Is our application broken right now? I guess not. Okay. It just got stuck on that, but we want to do pnpm exec, and then we want that ng add, but we're going to use nx to add it. And that's going to add our ngrx signals to our stuff. And this will give us the ability to add the signal store. That's weird. I'm not sure why this happened, but it did add NGRX signals. And now I should be able to refresh. Yep, we're good there. So now we've got our signal stored in place. There's one last thing. If we're going to add NGRX signals, there is. I actually like the NGRX operators here. There's a couple of operators. So concat latest from and tap response and map response. Those are both good ones, or all three are good ones. I like those. And then in the developer tools, there's the ESLint plugin that I also like. So let's go ahead and install NGRX operators. So we'll add this. And then the last one is we're going to add this plugin, ESLint plugin. And that should add all of the stuff that we want. And I do recommend the ESLint plugin for the Signal Store because there are a couple of gotchas with the Signal Store, like needing a generic on your stores, like your store features and things like that. The ESLint plugins are going to catch for you. And like you may get some weird errors that are not necessarily obvious right off the bat. The ESLint plugins will help you avoid a lot of those issues and errors. So if you're adding signals, I do recommend adding the operators. We're going to use the operators quite a bit. We're also going to use the ESLint stuff. Which ESLint configuration would you like to use? We're not gonna. We are gonna have operators and signals. So we'll use all. We aren't gonna use a lot of the other stuff, but the all package will work just fine. And we're in a good place now. Now we can create our store, right? So let's go back up here. And this should. So it's still complaining about that heroes. Let's just break out of this. Let's just see. Oh, it's still complaining about that. Where do I have heroes.ng? Heroes.ng. Lib components heroes view. Lib UI source index. Libs UI source index. Heroes dash view. Where is it getting this from? Let's run a reset on our npm exec nx reset and just see if something's cached. You may need this for the moment. Let's see what that is. wanted to post some general notes. We're still working all these out. Till then, you may need to install using the legacy peer depths. Oh, very cool. Very, very cool. You did this. You did this just for the stream. Nice. Thank you, Michael. We may have to take a look at this. So we reset the workspace, but I don't know why it thinks that we've got libs components. So we're building that. Heroes.ng. Where is it finding that .ng? .ng. File mask, no. Like, I'm not sure where it thinks it's getting this from. So it can't find the heroes component. See, it's saying libs UI source index.ts. Libs UI source index.ts. And if you look at our tsconfig base, libs UI source index.th. So there's the heroes component. And like if we go look at our app component, it sees it, right? There's the heroes components. If I just do like heroes view 2 here, this is going to break here, right? Because now it can't find it. This is broken. And when I do that, that's now fixed. Like the store is fine, the model is fine, the heroes view. Now it works. That is so weird. It just, there must have been something cached in my NX reset, didn't catch it. I'm not sure why. So everything's working here. So let's go back to our store, right? We want to build a store, and we want to export const, and this is our heroes store equals signal store. Boom. Right. So now we've got our signal store. We want with state, right? And here, this is where we're going to add our stuff, right? There we go. There's with state. And here we can just say, hey, our state is going to be create heroes view. And here we can say, hey, our hero is, and we can start with the default hero that they want us to use, right? So the hero that they were specifying here is Windstorm. So we'll grab Windstorm. And like this is a little bit more complicated, but it's going to give us more power as we move forward, right? So there's our Windstorm hero. So we need to add this to our component, right? That's the next piece right here, right? So in our component, they're going to have us add the hero. We're going to do the same. We're going to go back to our heroes view. And they're just using an H2, so we'll do the same. So here we'll add our H2. And at this point, we need our hero. So we're going to inject our, we're going to say read only, and you know what, we'll make this protected for now. Protected, read only, hero store equals inject hero store, right? So go ahead and import hero store into our component. And we need to import inject also from Angular core. So there we go. So now we've got our store, and here, now we can say, hey, we want our hero store dot name. It's hero, right? There we go. We're using our hero store. Our hero store, oh, it has a hero, yep. And our hero is a signal stream. Perfect. So now if we go back to our application and we reload, oh, we're getting an R3 injector. No provider for signals. And that's totally correct because we didn't add a provider. So providers, hero store, right? So we're providing the hero store at the heroes component level for right now because this store is specific to the heroes view. We may do more in the future. Oh, there we go. Right. So now if we go take a look, we get Windstorm. Let's give Windstorm, but we'll worry about it later, right? Serving works, can't explain that exactly. It's so weird. I don't know what exactly was going on. But if we look now, we've got our Windstorm in place and we've bound it. So let's go ahead and commit at this point because we have made a bunch of changes. So we're just gonna stage everything and we're gonna say Added heroes component and state, right? Um, and there's an important reason why we're going this route over other routes. Um, we want to separate our state from our component for a couple of reasons. One, it makes our components probably more composable, but there may be some stuff we need to do in the future. Two, um, it makes our components and our services more testable. We've taken our logic out of our component, and right now there's no logic in this application, right? We're just bound to one value. I want to make sure, did I do it the same way they did it? Yeah. So they've added that in. That's great. But the separation is important, and it's going to continue to be important as you write more and more complicated software. The more state you mix into your components, the more you're kind of muddying the waters, right? And I look at it kind of like so like if you've ever been around a picky eater, I've known a couple of picky eaters where they had to have those plates that you give to children, right, where everything is separated, right? So like my potatoes go in this little section of the plate, right? And instead of moving my fingers around, we can talk about it on Excalidraw. That is not it. Where is my Excalidraw? Well, let's just grab a new one. Excalidraw. Okay. So let's get a new canvas, right? And like if you've ever been around a picky eater, right? Like a really picky eater, you'll recognize these plates. And I know some adults that still have to use these plates, right? Um, and they're typically divided up something like this, right? And maybe your potatoes go here, and maybe your little like your peas or your broccoli or whatever goes here, right? Um, and down here is the main piece of your entree. Maybe it's a taco, who knows, right? And then over here you might have something else, right? But the whole point of this plate, and basically I just drew like a Mexican wrestler with their mask on, um, which if you guys have never watched Mexican wrestling, it's a good time. But the whole point of this plate is that you might have like well, that's ugly gravy, but you might have some gravy on your potatoes here, right? And they don't want that gravy to get on this. They don't want the gravy to get in their peas, right? They're very, very picky, and they want to keep everything separated. The reason I bring this up is without this kind of separation, this is kind of the stuff we're building. I'm a very, very picky coder, right? Without this separation, this gravy and potatoes might get in my peas, or my peas might get in my potatoes, right? And once that happens, it's very, very difficult to separate it out again, right? So if we start by separating things like this, we don't have to go through the pain of drawing things out and separating them in the future when we need them. Instead, they start out separated. We can treat them as their own component. We don't have to worry about it. Once we start mixing, we get into this messy world, and the more you mix, the more difficult it is to pull things apart, right? Like again, going back to the food, if you've ever had like you've ever been around a really, really small child who turns like their ice cream and their cake into like an ice cream cake soup, right? Like that's the ultimate mixture, right? That's your code that that's your component that's like and I kid you not, I've seen this component and people told me that it was better than it originally was, right? I've seen a component that is 12,000 lines of code, has a whole bunch of state in it. Nobody wants to touch it because if you make a change anywhere in that component, you might break an entire application. You really don't know what's going on in that component, right? That's like the ice cream cake soup that little kids will make, right? There's no way you're separating that out without some serious, some serious technology and filtration. And really, it's going to be very, very difficult to get back to a piece of cake and some ice cream, right? You've turned it into a soup. It's a mess. It's better to just throw it out, give them a new plate with cake and ice cream if you care that much, right? Um, but that's what we're trying to avoid, right? And that component that I saw that was 12,000 lines of code, originally it was around 15,000 lines of code, I think they told me, and much worse than when I encountered it. Um, Nobody ever wants to work on code like that, right? Um, so how do we do it? We basically turn ourselves into picky coders, and we keep things very, very separated, right? That's the point of what we're talking about here. Um, so this, what we're doing looks like more work, and it is, right? And that's the trade-off, is that it is more work, it requires more thought, and your programmers may not be able to follow or keep up initially, right? There's probably some retraining and stuff that needs to happen. Um, but thinking about your code and your state differently is going to give you superpowers later on, right? That's hilarious. Superpowers when we're talking about heroes, but um, it's going to make the future easier. But you're paying more in upfront cost, right? Like, um, if we talk about Excalibur again, right? And let's get a new canvas here, and right. Um, Most people think in upfront cost, right? So if we mark red as upfront cost, um, right, with our solution, we've got a lot of upfront cost, right? In a lot of lean agile shops, they tend to try to optimize this upfront cost, right? And our solution has maybe 2 or 3 times more upfront cost, right? Because more thought, more skill, more time will be spent doing ours. But right, let's take a look at what's the cost to our solution in a month. Well, maybe it's this much, right? But maybe the upfront cost incurs this, right? Like the typical solution where you mix everything together might incur this, right? 6 months down the road, right? Maybe our solution has this much cost, right? But the where we minimized upfront cost, 6 months down the road when we want to add a new feature, we're paying a whole bunch more cost, right? And then maybe 2 years down the road, we're again paying this much, but 2 years down the road, right, now we're paying this. And suddenly this solution where we optimized for the upfront cost is starting to become more and more expensive as these long-term propositions grow. And maybe 5 years down the road we need to make a change, right? But 5 years down the road we're like, nope, this is broken, it's time to rewrite, right? Holy cow, this is difficult with a trackball mouse. Um, right, and now your solution where we optimized up front, this is a long rant. It is a long rant because it's on my mind constantly, right? Like we optimize so much in modern development for this initial piece, right? Like how quickly are your tickets getting out? How right? But what we're not considering is um, release day fires, we could call this, right? Like how many release day fires do we put out? And then, how much are we spending to add the first round of changes? How much are we spending to write the second round of changes? And at what point does a rewrite become necessary, right? And this is the way trackball mouse exactly. So, um, but I missed a bunch of. Um, you talk about that was a beast. I know Henderson agrees too. Yeah, this is this is what I've been talking about a lot. And in fact, NG Asia just approached me. I need to get back to them. They want me to speak in July on this very same topic. Um, and I've spent a lot more time thinking about it. And so I'm looking forward to that talk, right? So tried some good old generative AI to get myself a toaster. He created a component, a service, and it works fine. No additional libraries. That's awesome, Marcus. Jason, do you have any cool idea about a project in healthcare and science? I need to make a project that will convince them to hire me for a senior back end, front end, whatever. Um, so I did work in healthcare for a while. And one place where healthcare really, really struggles, and this is universally, um, is compliance. And I think a lot of industries struggle in compliance. So, um, one thing that I think would get you hired almost immediately, in any country, regardless, right, is if you could put together something that allows people to do workflows for compliance. Um, isi.it. And I need to end here pretty soon. Um, is this your site, Abra? Yeah, you're not wrong, Michael. This is a fun site. I'm enjoying I'm enjoying all this stuff that they've put together here. I do, Ole. I do need to make shorts. And you're not wrong. Um, this is the site for the foundation that you're applying to. Well, you can tell right now that um, data is a huge thing for them. Um, so if I was to apply to them and I really wanted to like knock their socks off, so to speak, in an interview. These guys obviously are flashy. They're doing some cool stuff. I'm enjoying the site. I don't know a whole lot about them, but their site is fun to look at, right? Um, if I was to apply to them, I would take like go to your whatever the Italian national health um, site is, find some data on that site about some statistic that the national health is tracking in Italy, and create a visualization that fits within this flow. It's a nonprofit too. Um, right? That would be my suggestion here because um, these guys are very, very flashy, and data science is mentioned everywhere. So the more you can show off data science and things like that, and even sustainable development. But I will tell you right now that the biggest struggle, even in Italy, that people are going to come up against are the compliance issues that they need to follow when they're dealing with insurance, when they're dealing with hospitals, when they're dealing with patients, right? And there's a whole bunch of compliance issues when you hire a new doctor. There's a whole bunch of compliance issues, when your hospital comes up with a new vendor. There's a whole bunch, like, if you can create something that helps people simplify that, something that will make people stop and go, wait, what's going on? This person knows what's going on, right? Um, so I need a series on testing, not component testing, not angular testing, testing from a reasoning philosophical point of view, because I think the way you think and explain it should be shared everywhere. What do you mean exactly with compliance? So with compliance, and like, so with my new job, there's a whole bunch of compliance because I work for a brokerage firm that we could have insider information on trades in the U.S., right? So when we talk about compliance, any investment accounts that I have to be watched, right? My money can be watched based on certain flags, things like that. Like everything I do has to be carefully monitored because I have the ability to, maybe not me personally, but I have the ability to access information that could allow me to make trades in the market that I could enrich myself, right? And so compliance for my industry means that I'm meeting certain levels of transparency, I'm meeting certain moral accountability, right? Like I have to be very transparent about everything I do in the industry because it there is that possibility that I can misuse the information that I have, right? For whatever reason. And it's very unlikely for me, but still, as a company and an organization, we need to make sure that everybody that works for the organization um, is very, very transparent and clear, right? There's a lot of reasons for that, but the biggest reason is protecting the company's reputation, and that's in an industry like ours, that's what they've got, right? It's the same thing for hospitals, right? So hospitals have compliance laws, and I know the U.S. compliance laws, but I know that like a lot of the EU and stuff like that have big compliance laws. So when a hospital goes to hire a doctor, right, um, they have to make sure that they're giving that doctor fair pay based on the market, and that doesn't mean that they're paying the doctor a lot, but they aren't paying the doctor too much or too little, right? And there's a whole bunch of rules that they have to follow when they hire a doctor that shows that this is the appropriate this is the appropriate doctor, and they have to show that they considered a certain number of doctors. They have to show this is what we looked at to determine salary. This is what we looked at, right? There's all of these rules that have to be followed so that the hospital can avoid the damage of appearing to be favoring certain types of doctors, right? Maybe they appear to favor only doctors that graduated from a certain school. Maybe they appear to favor doctors that are related to a doctor at the hospital, right? There's all these rules that hospitals go through so that they can avoid those issues. Those are compliance issues, right? And then with pay, right? Maybe it comes out that they're paying men more than male doctors more than female doctors, right? That's an issue, right? And so there's all these rules that they have to go through. Yeah. Well, and that's the tough thing. Yeah, regulations are another thing, but you can find out about that stuff. It's all publicly available information. um, but if you can take data, and help, right, and visualize it in such a way that it makes it easier for hospitals to say, yeah, we're compliant. Like, if I know you Italians at all, I know you guys love your rules, and I imagine the rules for Italian hospitals are crazy, and they're publicly available. That's the thing, is that these laws are publicly available, and like if you want to work for somebody who is a foundational research or something like that, um, showing that you understand the industry is going to help you way more, right? Like if you're going in cold, like the reality of getting a job is that usually if you know somebody, it's easier to get a job than if you don't, right? But if you're going in someplace cold, showing that you understand the industry and doing it in a way that fundamentally they're like, oh, this person understands, yeah, we need to consider them seriously, right? um yeah, it's not an easy, it's not an easy just like check the box, right? Like I built a BMI calculator. That's not going to get you into an organization like this, right? um so that's the that's the reality. And I've had this bright white screen up there, but understanding, and the tough thing about like this kind of stuff is it takes a long time to learn it, but it also takes a long time to get people to understand it. I agree with you, Johanderson, that we should do some talk about testing and things like that that we can cut down into some YouTube shorts, um, because this kind of philosophy, well, I don't think it's non-existent, Obradores. I think to get into it, you're going to have to go above and beyond, right? You're going to have to show them basically that they can't ignore you. Um, yeah. Um, Not to build a side project to wow a company. You likely won't. Building a clone of them won't. Yeah, exactly. You want, when you're going into, an industry of this caliber, you either need to have established your name or you need to establish your name in the interviewing process, right? Those are the, um, and so um, yeah, and you may impress them just by learning Golang and producing something impressive in Golang, because there may not be that many Golang developers in Italy. So yeah, I definitely need to stop here. I will I will consider cutting this one down into a YouTube short, because um, I think it's important to talk about this kind of stuff. Um, yeah, exactly, Abradores. That is exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to say that you're at their level so that they can't ignore you, right? So that they see you as a peer and not somebody who they have to, raise up to, right? Because um, the people with connections are always a step above you, right? Um, so if you don't have connections there, then the next best thing to do is just convince them that you belong. So yeah, it is out of reach. I realize, I'm recognizing that from what they do. Um, and that's where it becomes like, that's where you can't just throw your resume at a company, right? And I do need to end here pretty soon. But for certain companies, just throwing your resume at them is never going to be good enough, no matter how good you are, right? You need to know somebody in there. Maybe there's a recruiter who's helping you get through stuff, right? Maybe you have a friend that works there that's recommending you to somebody that's helping you get through the red tape. If that doesn't happen, um, then there has to be something about you in that process that they go, oh wow, we can't ignore this person, right? And to your point, like, you've got a bit of the 80-20 rule in there, where if you do more than the 80%, you're already filtering yourself into that 20% that are most likely to be considered, right? If you do more than 90%, you're increasing your chances. If you do more than 99%, then you're on their level, right? But um, for stuff like that, it's important for you. I use split keyboards. There you go, dude. You're in. You're in. You don't have to do anything else besides adding that you use split keyboards in your CV. Thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed the discussion. Next time we're going to work more into this. I mean, woohoo! We've got we've got Windstorm on the screen. We didn't make it very far through the Tour of Heroes, but we're doing more behind the scenes that's going to make our Tour of Heroes more ready for extension in the future. So yeah, you guys have a great day. Have a great rest of your your weekend.